Welcome to the Weekly Ledger. This is where I take a recap of the market. I look at the catalysts and risks ahead, as well as my own trade of the week. And if you watched any of the morning market videos, you will know that we've had some absolutely banging trades over the last week. So today is Monday, the 15th of September. This is a little later than usual, but that means we have an extra day worth of price action to analyze. I was doing some flying today, so that's why this one's out a little later, but usually this will be out every Sunday evening. So drop a reaction if you've been enjoying these videos. I'll keep bringing them out and let me know if there's anything else that you want to see. But let's get into it now, starting off with the market recap. So 1 week returns. We saw 116 coins with over 0% gains and 220 coins with less than 0% gains. So for what was seemingly a very bullish week, we've actually seen more of the same, where we have this common theme this cycle where you have selective coins outperforming and the rest simply underperforming. And that's been the case. You've had your majors, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. You've had your new and shiny coins like Hype, like meme coins. We had 2-3 months really of meme coin mania. However, your 2021 cycle trash, even your 2017 dinosaur coins, all of those layer ones like AVAX, Link, they haven't really been able to get going this cycle. Nowhere near their all-time highs. And that's really been the theme. You have to be able to identify your outperformers, whether you're a scalper on the 5-minute chart, whether you're swing trading on the daily chart, or whether you're just a long-term DCA investor. Because even as an investor, if you haven't been buying Bitcoin or Solana during the bear market or Ethereum earlier this year, well, you've underperformed. And that has been the common pattern. That's why we see, even in these bullish weeks, it's the select few coins. And it's why you need to have the skill of trading. You need to learn how to analyze markets, because you guys who have been watching my morning market videos will know we've caught some bangers this week. We caught Solana. I told you guys it looks ready for outperformance, and it's the skill of being able to identify those outperformers which allows you to have great returns, especially in this current market where it's super selective. And that has to be expected, right? Because cycles aren't just going to be the same playbook every single 4 years, where you look at what worked 4 years ago and you try again. No, it loses edge because everyone tries to do that. And that's the very reason it doesn't work, because if everyone's long, how can price go up? So you always have to outthink the market. It's a game of chess, and you have to expect the unexpected every single cycle. So with that being said, let's go look at the markets and let's contextualize what I've just talked about there. So looking at the weekly close. So for Bitcoin, on the weekly, we still have this bearish reversal, which we saw a very similar setup back in December to January. However, the weekly market structure, as I've been saying, is perfectly intact at this 101k level. That is your low that led to the recent high. So as long as the weekly candles do not close below there, Bitcoin is still in a weekly uptrend. However, for this chart to get bullish, we would need to close above 120k. So that will be around this level here. You can use the round number of 120k. These tend to be very useful when trading Bitcoin, as it tends to like these round numbers. It's simply because that's where lots of buying and selling likes to happen. That's where orders are generally placed, especially for investors and traders who are less price sensitive. So as we can see, Bitcoin's been unable to close a weekly above that 120k level. So to flip this market bullish on this time frame, we need to close above 120k. But as we know, yes, that is what we need to see on the weekly time frame, but that doesn't mean we can't take trades, because on the daily, we have had signs of a reversal here, and there has been some bullish signals. And of course, your daily trend leads into your weekly trend. Yes, it may have more fake outs, but your daily is always going to flip bullish before your weekly flips bullish in any given reversal. So on the daily, what have we seen? Well, we have this chart, which I'll flick to now, that I've been sharing with you guys all week. So it's the volume profile of the distribution based on the 4-hour chart, all of these levels. So this will change. That should be there. But this will change when I flick to the daily chart. You'll notice that it doesn't quite line up, but that's just because it's on a different time frame. So if that's what you're wondering, that's the reason why. But this is the volume profile levels. And currently, Bitcoin not only closed above last week's high, it also closed above the 50-day EMA. It also closed above the value area low. And it also flipped the daily 12 and 21 EMA bands green. So we now have your earliest possible confirmations of an uptrend on the daily time frame. That should be a setup which leads Bitcoin to hitting the POC, the value area high, and potentially even beyond. Of course, nothing's guaranteed in the markets. It's not 100% going to play out, but that's what you would want to see if you were to get bullish on Bitcoin on this time frame. So on a daily standpoint, Bitcoin is looking very promising here for an early sign of a reversal. And it looks to be that Bitcoin potentially is just lagging behind gold and lagging behind stocks, because what have we seen? Well, stocks, they are at all-time high. They're going into price discovery. The bulls in the stock market have been absolutely blasting the buy button in September. So stocks are at all-time high. Bitcoin currently lagging. And then you also have gold. Gold as well, currently at all-time high. Bitcoin again, lagging. So the real question here in this early trend reversal that we're seeing is Bitcoin now just going to play catch up and we're going to see capital flow back into Bitcoin? That's very much a possibility. Gold's had a nice run, although it's potentially going to be having a pretty decent daily breakout here. So watch out for that. If gold does continue breaking out today, tomorrow, and this week, potentially that's going to lead Bitcoin to consolidate and potentially even bleed lower. Because what we really want is gold to consolidate sideways as it did here. And that's what led to this lovely bullish move that we got on BTC. So watch closely at these assets. You want to see that Bitcoin was just simply lagging here and it actually take over in the next few days while gold and stocks cool off. And that's what's going to allow the focus to actually shift onto BTC. Now, if that doesn't happen, then potentially that lagging that Bitcoin has could actually be a show of weakness. It could mean that there simply is just too much supply, too many passive sellers coming in around these levels. But in reality, in the past few months, anyone who's bought Bitcoin is not in profit over here. So Bitcoin shouldn't really find weakness here. It shouldn't start closing below these daily bands again. Or for me, that would at least give me a sign to urge caution again, as potentially we're looking to just continue this downtrend, because it could just be a lower high bounce at the moment. When you look at the weekly, we are just coming into resistance where we've had that sweep and it could just be forming a lower high now in a downtrend. Again, on the weekly, it's not confirmed bullish until we break 120k. So it's really just this daily time frame, which we're now betting on for a reversal. And the play really is for Bitcoin to catch up to gold and stocks, which are very bullish at their own all-time highs. So you want to see Bitcoin now make a move towards its own all-time high. Otherwise, it is showing that lagging nature, and crypto is then showing a little bit of weakness. And that weakness could be for many reasons. Again, it could be because sellers are showing up on Bitcoin, or it simply could be money is rotating to altcoins too rapidly, and that steals flows away from BTC. And that's what we saw during this Bitcoin price action. Ethereum had one of its biggest runs this cycle, and that was at the detriment to Bitcoin. You didn't see Bitcoin mooning and ETH mooning together. No, you saw a clear rotation from Bitcoin into Ethereum. It's profit taking. We are getting to that later stage in the cycle where you see these rotations happen. And as you see now the rotation into Solana this week, you're starting to see those lower and lower caps as we move down the ladder start to get those flows. And again, that is a later cycle signal. So honestly, the best thing we can see is Bitcoin to take over again this week. That's the bet to make for me. I think this week should be focused on Bitcoin. I don't think Ethereum and Solana are going to offer the best trades, because if there is a bullish setup in crypto, it should be Bitcoin that runs next. Otherwise, we are, again, just probably be going to be moving down that ladder in the risk curve, going to lower and lower caps. And again, that would not be a good sign as you're increasing the risk appetite. Profits are rotating, and eventually the game of musical chairs ends. So that's something to think about in the coming days and base our decisions off what happens then with BTC. So that is everything for Bitcoin. Let's take a look at Ethereum. So let's actually grab this chart, the one we've been looking at. So I mentioned that if Ethereum holds this high time frame SR level, then it's probably just going to range between the all-time high and that SR. And that's exactly what's happened. If we break this 4.1k level, then we move into a range between the yearly open and 4.1k. It's as simple as that. But Ethereum managed to close above this choppy cluster of price action. So far, it's been almost fully retraced today. So again, it's to be expected. Ethereum hit its all-time high. That was the game. Investors didn't just get bullish into Ethereum, as I've been mentioning in the monthly outlooks. I don't think Wall Street waited for Ethereum to nuke all the way to 1.4k to say that, oh yes, this is great tech. No, it was a clear rotation from Bitcoin into ETH. It was a pure trade. So once the all-time high was hit, as I was mentioning, that was the target during the entire rally, because that's where liquidity is. Once that gets hit, it generates exit liquidity, and that is the sign to start distributing. And so far, until that all-time high level is reclaimed with a daily close, Ethereum, at best, you should expect it to continue consolidating between 4.1 and the all-time high at 4.9. If we break the all-time high, then sure. And then you can look for momentum trades over here. But why get chopped up during all of this if you can just wait for the nice, clean break and confirmation to then trade that lovely momentum which you know Ethereum can give you? But during this, after you've had a clear sweep of all-time high, no need to get chopped up in all of this mess, because it could also start falling back depending on where the wider market goes. So that's really it from Ethereum. The rotation, ever since it hit all-time high, has been into Solana. So let's pull up the Solana chart, because I've been talking about this one all week in morning markets. I took a trade on Solana that I planned out with you guys, and what a banger that one was. So on the weekly, we've seen Solana with a nice full-bodied close, but we are heading into resistance. So we're heading into that 240, 250, and 260 levels. Let's actually pull up this chart over here. Let's hide this for a second. So as I mentioned to you guys, this was the target ever since that yearly open started to get reclaimed and flipped into support. So on Solana, we've now tagged an area which we know sellers were going to show up at, and they have so far, starting off the week red for Solana after a big green week. So expected to see some profit taking coming in here. And what you really want to see is this weekly candle should hold. As soon as this weekly candle is fully retraced on Solana, it's most likely that the rally is actually over then. Therefore, what you just want to see is on your daily time frame, can we reclaim 250? Because if we can't, now that we've started to lose 240 and we've hit this resistance where we knew sellers was going to show up, you have all of these stops built up, which going into FOMC next week is potential targets for a little liquidation run. Now, of course, as I said, the main low, which you don't want to see lost on Solana, is this weekly candle. So that is 206. You wouldn't want to see price even retest that, especially not this week, as that retraces all of this rally in 1 week, which would be very bearish. That shows a lack of demand. Therefore, it's simple. You've hit resistance. Now you need to find support, and whether that comes in at these daily bands, I'm not sure. All I know is the majority of this beautiful trend, potentially even the best part of this trend, is over now on Solana. And maybe we do get another leg up, I'm not sure. But my bets would be on Bitcoin now for money to rotate back into there this week and in the weeks ahead if we are going to see crypto be bullish. Because you've had the Ethereum run, you've now had this beautiful Solana run. We could very well see money rotate back to BTC, because again, you have to be selective this cycle. You can't just pick any coin or pick the low caps, pick something like, as I said, AVAX, which something like this has really just underperformed this cycle, way off its highs. And the reason for that is simple. As I got on here on screen, you have underwater bag holders from last cycle. Got a little meme there. The reason something like AVAX has underperformed so much, and it's trading right now at the same level it was trading in its bear market, so the equivalent of Bitcoin trading at 15 to 20k. The reason it's trading so low is because you have all of the traders who long this beautiful move on AVAX back in 2021 last cycle, made amazing gains. You also had a whole cohort who then also bought the top or didn't take profit throughout this rally. Round tripped all of their gains by the end of 2022. And now anytime price rallies up into this block over here, what are you going to do if you were underwater and bought the top on AVAX? You're going to sell. And that's why as soon as price comes into it, sellers show up. And then what is a real key sign of weakness is that it couldn't even make a higher high On this rally, sellers showed up even earlier. And it's super simple. You're just seeing money favor the majors. So that's a quick rant over. That is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana covered. Let's go to the indexes. So total 3, what we are seeing on this chart is price is above this February 3rd liquidation level. That has been the level to flip, and since we got above it, well, you are now breaking out of this compression pattern. And actually, I've got it on this chart here. So we got the breakout of this compression pattern. We've made a new high. So again, it further supports the claim that you're seeing the majors running. Total 3 is all altcoins excluding Bitcoin and ETH. And unlike others, which is actually excluding the top 10, you're seeing it's much, much weaker, much further off of its highs. You can visually see this if I pull them up together. Let's get total 3. Here you are. You can see total 3 is right at its highs, whereas others, everything outside the top 10, isn't even above its 2024 level in that high it made in March when altcoins were rallying hard. So, clear show of weakness in those lower caps, and look, maybe they run later on. Towards the end of the cycle, you get that classic rotation, but so far, it's been the majors, it's been the new and shiny, like your hypes, it's been meme coin mania, those assets that have been favored this cycle, not necessarily those same layer ones or even things like mana and sand, all of that decentralized housing, decentralized real estate, all of those old narratives of 2021, they haven't come back and performed. And you have to really think about that, because it's been the assets that are most likely to get an ETF, like Solana. It's been the assets that are on the CME futures. Those are the ones that have been favored. Those are the ones that have had the best returns, been the best to trade on the long side. Whereas if you're trading on the long side, something like AVAX, you could be a profitable trader. But if this is the coin you choose to trade, this bull market, potentially you are unprofitable just because you picked the wrong asset selection. So I want this weekly outlook to really be a mini lesson on coin selection, understanding rotations and outperformance, and it can be as simple as using your market structure levels. As simple as saying that low led to this high. Okay, that low led to this high. Whereas on AVAX, if you go to the daily, you were seeing the same thing. So that low led to this high, that low led to this high. But if we get them side by side, which I'll do now, what you can then do is zoom out to something like the weekly. We go to the weekly here. And then you will see that this total 3 chart made a new high above its 30 December cluster of order blocks. I'll highlight that in orange quickly. Whereas this others chart, this AVAX chart, is nowhere near its equivalent level over here. So again, 30th of December 2024, this cluster of order blocks, total 3 has closed above it. AVAX is nowhere near it. So yes, on the daily, is it tracking the performance of the altcoin market? Sure. But on the weekly, those higher time frames, it is lagging behind. So that shows you where the demand is. It's been in Solana, it's been in Ethereum, it's been in Hype, and all of these coins, it's been in XRP, but it's not been in the old stuff from 2021. So that's a little lesson as we see these breakouts on the others chart and on the total 3 chart. It's great to see, but remember, asset selection is still everything. However, both charts look good, they're setting up well, and they're building structure where you would expect these high highs and higher lows, even on the others chart, to lead to a much bigger move in the coming weeks. So overall, looks good, looks like it's building in September, which is typically not a bullish month on stocks or in crypto. However, you're seeing so far the markets are building good structure. However, we are heading into FOMC. So that brings me into catalysts and risks. So we've got FOMC on Wednesday. The market's currently pricing in a 96% probability of a rate cut and a 4% probability of 2 rate cuts. So first of all, if we see 2 rate cuts, that's going to potentially be a big market mover because that is not being priced in at all. I'd think initially the markets would price that in bullishly as it's liquidity positive. However, if you see 2 rate cuts, you have to ask, is it actually bullish? Because that is the Fed saying that they're behind the curve. After pausing for so long, to have to do 2 rate cuts could also be interpreted as panic. So something to think about. Doesn't necessarily mean it's automatically bullish if you have loads and loads of rate cuts, because aggressive rate cuts, they actually are a result of something being wrong in the system. So something to think about there. However, it's most likely that Powell does not cuts 125 basis points, which is priced in at 96%. And that's going to be probably the least volatile for the markets because that is the expected outcome of the meeting. Then, of course, if there are no rate cuts, that's again going to be a big market mover as it's being priced in at 0%, so not at all. Are analysts pricing in no rate cuts this week? So that, of course, would be perceived as very bearish. But Powell, as the Fed chairman, he is very much a guy who telegraphs his decisions. He sticks to the data, so he's always late. So it's very typical for him to not surprise the markets. It really is unlikely that either of those outliers will actually take place, and we'll probably just see 1 rate cut. And therefore, it's more about what he says rather than the actual interest rate decision. It's how Powell talks about the markets, how he talks about monetary policy for the rest of 2025. It will be the pricing in of how many cuts are we going to have this year. That will affect the market. So watch out for his actual speech because most likely we see just 125 basis points cut. But it's been a good week, and last year in September, a rate cut led to a big rally across the markets. Could we see it again? I'm not sure, but that's what brings me on to trade of the week. So first of all, I just want to first highlight this Solana trade. So if you guys have been watching morning markets, hopefully you have, because we've had some absolute bangers of a trade in here, especially on Solana, but also one on Hype. Let's get this position tool back up. Not this one. Is it there? I don't think so. Anyways, let's see if it will come up. I believe it was there. Never mind. I've lost the position tool, but we'll just go with it anyway. So you guys can check my morning markets video from this week. Let's get on the right chart here for a second. Let's go to lower time frames. And let's look at Solana. So again, you guys can look back at my morning markets videos to see the exact position, but I took a long on Solana. It was around this level here with a stop around there, something like that. You can go back in the videos and check. But if you guys remember, I was talking in the trade chat with a couple of you. Took my first TP at this sweep over here for 50%. And my second TP when we lost this H1 50 EMA, because that was the H1 trend which was being disrespected. So I fully exited that position now. I'm out of it. That trade was a banger. We caught all of this beautiful outperformance on Solana, played the H1 trend, and that goes to show just how simple trading can be. All this setup was waiting for a daily breakout. I'll go back to it. So in the morning markets videos, I told you guys, as soon as we close above this high, look for longs on the H1 trend. And boom, we closed above it. The H1 trend held, made new highs, held, made new highs, held, made new highs. And then after, we went to the H150, made new highs, lost the H150. It provided an initial bounce, but into a lower high. And that tells you that you have a probable reversal here with the lower high after you lose the band, which gives you your signal to exit. That simple. You just play the bands as they go along after you get that initial confirmation on what I used was the daily close. So I was looking for that daily breakout. So that trade is now over. Just wanted to highlight that to you guys. I've fully closed that position out. And now let's recap the trade of the week from last week's weekly ledger video. So I told you guys that around this value area low is where I'm going to be looking for a trade. So if we flip it, I told you I'd be looking for longs. If we reject it, I told you I'd be looking for shorts. And well, we have flipped and retested that value area low. We've got those daily 12 and 21 bands flipping green. We're above that 50-day EMA. So for me, it's a trigger to get long, playing it initially to the value area high, but really just watching for any price action to see if we do form some sort of reversal, then I'll exit. But maybe that reversal comes after an all-time high breakout. Maybe it comes at 120k. I don't know. There's no set take profit on it. It's simply just a long after I've seen my confirmations. Does it mean it's going to win? Not necessarily. Just like the Solana trade last week and the Hype trade, they were both winners, but they could have easily lost. It's simply just managing risk and getting exposure due to my system confirmations. And everything you'd want to see, you've seen here on Bitcoin on the daily time frame to get a potential reversal. Now, could FOMC provide some volatility both ways? Yes, it almost definitely will. But I think above the daily bands, that's where my stop is going. Don't want to see price go below there, because if we do, then we're probably more likely to retest some of these lows around 110k. Therefore, that's the trade. We've reclaimed the value area low. We've retested it now once and twice today. I'm playing this for a move back up to the other side of the range, and if it gets invalidated, that's fine, because potentially we could actually be still forming that weekly downtrend as I showed you guys at the beginning of this video. Need to get above 120k to get bullish on the weekly, but of course we don't need to wait for the weekly to get long and take our setups. So that is the trade of the week. That is what I'm looking at in the markets. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll see you guys in the next.